I had an advantage of seeing the way that the players at this table played in the tournaments that I was commentating. That was an advantage and a disadvantage, because it also meant that for the 12 hours or 10 hours prior to playing in the game, I was broadcasting. So by the time I got in the game, I had a couple hours to rest. And Randy Liu, Nanonoko, was kind enough to take over and broadcast, alone for a couple hours while I rested for a couple hours before getting my seat in the game. But I'd been putting in pretty full days on the job on the microphone before that. So it was cool that I got to see the way that my opponents were playing, but it was also, I was a little bit drained sitting down in the game. But like I said, that doesn't really take too big of a toll on my play, I don't think.
Yeah, definitely. Since you're speaking to three actually commentators as well for this show, I always tell people that watch the show, commentating is almost 2 times to 2.5x more tiring than actually playing, because you're breaking down every hand. You're trying to use your knowledge, to best take apart the action. Also, I don't know if there's chat, if you're commentating and interacting with the chat, trying to keep an upbeat. So I can understand you just being completely exhausted by the time you actually got into the game.
Just to, also doing it alone and doing it with somebody else is a big difference. And what people have, complained is, oh, say Doug Polk or Alex Rowley have, this in-depth video. You only have, a minute and a half in between hands to really just, talk about, what's going on. So you have to decide what to tell, how to commentate and what to tell the audience. It's kind of a tough thing, because it's, really you got to choose, what to say. And there's,
yeah.
You want to talk about a hand, you could talk, you could go infinite. You could talk for an hour about a single hand if you really want to.
Absolutely.
So that's the tough thing about
it's always funny. It's always funny watching the, following along and interacting with the Twitch chat as I'm broadcasting. Because anytime somebody, let's say we're on the river and I think somebody just has a hand that's too high in the range and they have to call, right? And the other guy's bluffing. And I'm like, well, I'd love to see him call here. He's at the top of his range. It's kind of a bluff catcher, but it's the best hand he can have. See everybody in the Twitch chat. Well, yeah, of course you can see the cards, right? But then it's the opposite. Let's say the guy's value betting, and I'm like, well, you know what? This hand is too near the top of his range. He has to call. And then they're like, that's why he's not in the game. He would call with this crappy hand. You should
yeah.
call. So
the chat.
It's it's really, really funny. But yeah, my broadcasting style is, I like to kind of analyze hands from a little bit more of a game theory perspective, just because I guess my first background, my initial, I guess, foray in talking poker to a wide audience was in making training videos. And a lot of that kind of carried over into my broadcast style as well. So while I do come from just a media broadcast background in general, we're doing the play-by-play and kind of keeping everybody filled in on the X's and O's of what's going on. While I do enjoy doing that, I also enjoy kind of more in-depth strategy that some people kind of are hesitant to get into, or might not, you kind of might lose some audience members, but I'm just so passionate about it that in certain hands it just comes out in me where I'm like, no, this is the best hand you can have. You have to call, for example. So.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be super confident in your game to be able to give away that much strategy. And obviously when you're at your level and you're so confident in the way you play and that people can't exploit you, then you're confident enough to discuss hands and give strategy away.
The thing, too, is, you've been around. Right. Everybody knows you've been around. And you've also played on, every single show. And that's something that, the Twitch chat or YouTube chat is dude, this guy plays on every show, and you still want to, he's going to give other people credit for, being in the booth and, them not being able to see their opponent's cards. That's one of the biggest pet peeve I have about commentators, is some commentators don't play on shows, and you're just like, okay. Nice analysis.
Kane, I know.
Right.
I know. Obviously, like you said, that you played with some of those guys over the years, whether it's online or live. Your Tom Dwan or Phil Ivey or Jungle Man, of course, and you said Makita, Fish 2013, Makita, whatever his last name is, who's still in the Super High Roller Bowl. But I know that you grew up, I'm sure, watching Poker After Dark and watching shows like that, and I know you were playing online those days. But watching those shows, right, and then now sitting in a game where you're playing for millions of dollars and you're sitting at the same table with Phil Ivey, Tom Dwan, and Jungle Man all at the same time, that has to be kind of surreal.
Oh, yeah. It's awesome. I mean, before I started playing poker for a living, it was a very close friend of mine and I came up together, and we actually went to middle school together. Then, we graduated from middle school. He basically dropped out of high school in the first couple months and said he's going to play poker for a living. And I told him he was nuts, right? I thought, maybe it's something you can make a little bit of money at, but not something you could really, make it your primary profession. And then, sure enough, after 6 months or a year, he was doing very, very well. And by the time I became a senior in high school / freshman in college is really when I started taking it seriously. But all that time throughout high school, we would just sit there like, oh man, like Durr was our idol. We want to be like these guys online and have that sort of success. And at the time, it seemed to me like a goal that might be a little bit too far out of reach, simply because we didn't have the connections. We didn't know the top players in the world, but just kind of us both being, intelligence and being able to work through game theory and figuring that out together. And of course, something that was always important to me, especially coming up when I first started, it's become less important now because the games are just tougher in general and you don't have as many opportunities for it. But back then, game selection was just like the number one, it was the most important part of being a professional poker player online. So I played a lot of heads up, and I played a lot of heads up against non-professionals, and it worked out very, very well for me early on. And then I got to the point where, there were less kind of amateurs playing the heads up tables, and I had to battle the six max, and then Black Friday happens, and now I got to battle in live poker tournaments. And as time has gone on, I've constantly improved my game, I think, to stay up with what I need to do in order to compete at the highest possible levels and make the most money. Because for me, it's always been more of, kind of how much money can I make from this? This is my living. I've always kind of approached it in kind of a business way. Even though I do have passion for the game, I've never been the kind of guy to, play a grudge match against somebody who, heads up, who I'm, not sure whether or not I have an edge, kind of for ego. That was never my thing.
So it sounds like you always check your ego at the door. And what was the time frame from you starting poker to you taking some shots in the nosebleeds on full tilt?
So I'd say the first hands I played of online poker were when I was a senior in high school. So let's say early on in senior year. And then by the time I was playing Rail Heaven was midway to the end of my freshman year of college. So let's say it was a year and a half from
absurd.
The first deposit I made online to me playing Rail Heaven, playing the highest stake cash game that's ever existed.
And holding
online.
your own, so you must be a quick learner.
That is insane.
So you must have destroyed that first year. You must have destroyed that first year.
I did pretty well. games were a lot different back then than they are now. I will say that. If I started all over again, there's a much higher probability that I would not be successful than there was back then. I mean, now the games are just so incredibly tough compared to how they were back then.
Wow, amazing. And I was going to say, it's amazing how poker's evolved so much over the years that, maybe you're humble and won't admit this, but you're sitting in this game, this $1 million buy-in, and you are confident that you have an edge probably over Phil Ivey and Tom Dwan, who are the idols and the guys back in the day who everyone looked up to and are still amazing players. But back in the day, those were the guys. And now someone like yourself who's using Pio Solver, who is a technical guy, and, there's a lot of great players. You look at Makita, who's at the table with you, and, I'm sure you're super confident at that game that you have an edge over Phil Ivey and Tom Dwan. It's amazing.
Those are your words, not mine.
I was like, he's not gonna.
I mean, I know you're not gonna say that, but I'm sure in your mind that you're not worried too much. Obviously you're looking at the spots, you're looking at the other guys, you're looking at the Asian businessmen, but
right.
I mean,
now more bang bang. Jeez,
come on, I'm just trying to give you credit. I mean,
you can't say these things.
I mean, Tom and Phil are obviously very, very talented players. I think to your point, they play less of a game theory optimal style. So
right, that's what I mean.
It's likely that they are doing things where they're able to be exploited in certain ways. It's also more likely, however, that they are able to exploit their opponents if their opponents are diverting optimal strategy. They're able to exploit their opponents probably better than I would be, because at that table, kind of my idea was I'm going to approach it from more of a game theory, more of a game theory background. The players were on the whole very, very talented, and therefore I was going to try to play a relatively unexploitable style. And I, of course, was very, very happy to have direct position on Nikita, who I think is extremely tough. And also Jungle Man, I was on their direct left, so I was really happy kind of with that seating sign.